Have you ever wondered why the quietest women often leave the deepest wounds in a man's soul? It's because silence is not the absence of sound, it's the presence of power. In a world where noise dominates, where attention is currency, and where emotions are spilled out without thought, the woman who chooses stillness becomes a mirror to the male psyche. She forces him to see himself without the distractions he uses to hide. Carl Jung understood that the unconscious is not polite, does not wait for permission to speak. When a woman retreats into silence, she awakens a man's buried shadows. His fear of abandonment, his hunger for validation, his unresolved mother complex. Suddenly, her absence feels louder than her presence ever did. The first silent move is not about ignoring him. Out of pettiness, it is about withdrawing your emotional energy so completely that he begins to feel the echo of his own emptiness. You do not argue. You do not explain. You simply become a closed door. And in that moment, his ego, accustomed to your warmth, stands outside in the cold. This is not manipulation. It is the natural recoil of feminine instinct when respect has been fractured. It is the woman's unspoken declaration. You will not have the privilege of my softness until you have earned it. Men rarely admit it, but silence from a woman they desire gnaws at them more than anger. Anger can be dismissed, deflected even, used as fuel for his own pride. But silence offers no foothold. It denies him the drama that keeps his ego fed. He is left to sit in the stillness of his own thoughts, and those thoughts are rarely kind to him. The human mind abhors a vacuum, and in the absence of your words, he begins to project his own insecurities into the space you've left behind. Jung called this projection the act of placing one's hidden truths onto another because facing them directly would be too painful. The second silent move lies in your presence without pursuit. You exist in his world without orbiting him. Are there, living, breathing, moving forward, but you do not bend toward his gravity. This is the kind of detachment that intoxicates a man, because it is laced with mystery. He cannot be sure if you are thinking of him, and the uncertainty eats away at the masculine need for certainty. Men crave clarity when it comes to possession, and the woman who does not confirm his hold on her becomes the woman he cannot stop thinking about. There is an alchemy in restraint. By refusing to offer him every emotional reaction he expects, you starve his ego while feeding his soul. The soul longs for something deeper than validation. It longs for meaning, it's for challenge, for something it cannot immediately conquer. And so your silence transforms you from a chapter he thought he could skim into a book he will never finish reading. The third silent move is the unspoken boundary. You do not broadcast it. You do not warn him. You simply embody it. This is the line in the sand he discovers only when he crosses it tanned. By then, your absence is already unfolding. This move is rooted in self-worth, not in games. Jung would call it individuation, the process of becoming whole within yourself, independent of the roles others expect you to play. A man can feel when a woman's sense of self is not negotiable. And that awareness triggers both fear and respect. Understand this. In every man exists a primal fear of losing the woman who made him feel alive. Not the woman who chased, not the woman who pleaded, but the woman who stood in her own light, making him feel like a better version of himself simply by being near her. When such a woman withdraws, he is not only losing her, he is losing the reflection of the man he believed he could be. Silence in this context is not absence, it is presence turned inward. You do not disappear from the world. You disappear from his world. This forces him to confront the reality that your value was never in your availability, but in the richness of your energy, your attention, your feminine mystery. And so the ache begins. It is not the ache of lust alone, nor even the ache of love. It is the ache of unfinished business in his soul. The male psyche does not easily release the woman who became his mirror, his muse, and his mystery all at once. This is why these silent moves are dangerous. Not because they harm, but because they awaken. They strip away the layers of distraction and reveal the raw truth beneath. And once a man has tasted the truth about himself in the shadow of your absence, he cannot unlearn it. The fourth silent move is the absence of emotional reaction in moments designed to provoke you. A man will consciously or unconsciously test the stability of your emotions, because emotional predictability gives him control. He might withdraw affection, mention another woman, delay his replies, or challenge your boundaries in subtle ways. Most women respond with anger, with questions, with a flood of words designed to demand clarity. But the woman anchored in her own worth responds with something far more unsettling: nothing at all. This silence is not avoidance. It is the quiet acknowledgement that your dignity is not up for negotiation. You let his provocation fall into the void like a stone into deep water, vanishing without a ripple. He expects the firestorm, the tears, the chase. Instead, he meets a calm so unshakable it exposes the immaturity of his games. Carl Jung would call this a refusal to participate in another's unconscious drama. The moment you react, you enter his stage. Play the role he has unconsciously assigned to you, and give his ego exactly the validation it craves, whether positive or negative. By holding your silence, you deny the script. And in denying the script, you force him to face the reality of himself without your emotional labor cushioning the blow. This move unnerves him because it mirrors the ancient feminine archetype of the high priestess, mysterious, self-contained, untouchable. She does not reveal her inner temple to every visitor, and in withholding, she creates a longing not easily quenched. Your calm becomes a mirror in which his own instability becomes glaringly obvious. The masculine ego, used to steering the emotional current, now finds itself adrift in waters it cannot control. And then there is the fifth silent move, the one that leaves a mark so deep it lingers for years after you are gone. It is the silence of a woman who has rebuilt her life so completely that his memory no longer has a room in it. You do not announce your healing, you do not parade your growth, you simply live it. This silence is not about him at all. It is the final stage of detachment, the moment your spirit stops circling around the axis of his validation and finds its own gravitational center here. Silence becomes liberation. It is no longer a strategy, no longer a response. It is your natural state, because your energy no longer leaks into the past. You have integrated the shadow he awakened in you, healed the wound his presence exposed, and in doing so, you have transcended the need for him to understand, regret, or return. This is the silence Jung would describe as the individuation of the feminine soul, when a woman becomes whole. She ceases to play the unconscious roles assigned to her by others. She no longer needs to be the healer, the nurturer, the muse, or the mirror. She chooses her roles consciously, and she can just as easily choose none at all for a man. Encountering this kind of silence is not merely painful, it is existential. It forces him to reckon with the fact that he no longer has access to the version of you that existed in his world. That woman is gone, dissolved into a new self he will never fully know. This realization haunts him not because of what you do, but because of what you no longer do. He remembers the woman who once gave him her laughter freely, who answered his messages with warmth, who listened to his fears without judgment. And yet, in the present, there is only the quiet, unyielding reality that her life has moved forward without him. The human psyche struggles with the permanence of loss, but it struggles even more when the loss is a living person who simply no longer chooses to belong to your story. You become the ghost that is not dead. Not the kind that lingers, but the kind that vanishes so completely it makes him question whether he ever truly knew you. This is the ache that does not fade, the ache of a man who realizes too late that silence was not the absence of love, but the presence of self-respect. Such a woman cannot be begged back into the roles she has outgrown. And the deeper truth is this: your silence was never about punishment. It was about alignment. It was about returning your energy to yourself so that you could become the woman you were meant to be. With or without him, silence in its most potent form is not a weapon. It is a sanctuary. It is the space where the feminine soul retreats, to cleanse itself of the noise of unworthy connections, to remember its own music. And when you emerge from that sanctuary, you carry with you an energy so rare, so self-contained, that men sense it before you speak a word. The ache in his soul is not caused by losing you, it is caused by realizing he never truly possessed you in the first place. A man's longing under the weight of feminine silence is not simple, it is layered. Like the chambers of the unconscious Jung so often spoke of. On the surface, there is ego injury. Beneath that, fear of loss. Deeper still, there is a confrontation. With his shadow, the part of himself he hides not only from the world, but from his own awareness. Your silence becomes the trigger that forces these layers open. At first, he may frame it as pride. How could she ignore me? How could she walk away without explanation? This is his ego speaking, demanding the familiar game of pursuit and surrender. But when the silence stretches, when no reaction comes to feed his sense of control, the second layer emerges: insecurity. Questions creep in at night when the world is quiet. Was I not enough? Did she ever truly need me? These questions are not born from love, they are born from the masculine fear of irrelevance. In a woman's life, the deeper ache begins when the shadow is stirred. Jung described the shadow as the disowned self, the hidden impulses, wounds, and weaknesses we bury to maintain our self-image. For men, the shadow often contains feelings of vulnerability, emotional dependence, and the fear of inadequacy. Where silence is a mirror with no distortion it reflects. These hidden, act parts back to him with merciless clarity. Men who are unaccustomed to facing their shadows will often react with anger or dismissiveness. They will tell themselves that your silence means nothing, that you are cold, or that they never cared. But the unconscious does not care for the stories the conscious mind tells. It continues its work in the dark, whispering truths he cannot easily ignore. This is why weeks or months later, the ache still lingers in the dance between the masculine and feminine. Silence is not passive, it is an active withdrawal of emotional current. The masculine thrives on direction, movement, and pursuit. The feminine, in its awakened state, thrives on being rooted, receptive, and sovereign. When the feminine cuts off emotional current, the masculine loses its compass. Without your attention, as a point of orientation, he drifts. This drifting is not simply about losing a relationship, it is about losing a reflection. The male ego often uses a woman's admiration to affirm his identity. When that admiration is gone, he must either collapse into self-pity or undertake the difficult inner work of finding that validation within himself. Some will take the path of growth, others will chase distraction. But all will remember the one who forced them to confront the emptiness inside. There is a reason Jung connected the anima, the feminine archetype, within a man's psyche to his sense of meaning and creativity. When a man experiences a profound connection with a woman, she often becomes the living embodiment of his anima, the muse that stirs his soul into creation and vision. Silence disrupts that connection. It does not kill the anima, but it severs his access to it through you. The result is a sense of spiritual starvation. This is why men will sometimes return to women they have wronged, and not because they suddenly love them in a new way, but because they miss the way they felt in her presence. They miss the mirror, the muse, the unseen energy that lifted them. But if your silence has been true and complete, you are no longer the same woman he remembers. You have shifted into a higher frequency, and he is left with the ghost of a connection he can no longer touch. Silence also reshapes the power dynamic. In words, he may have dominated. In silence, you hold the throne. There is nothing more sovereign than a woman who has mastered the art of restraint. She does not waste her voice trying to justify her worth. She does not rush to soothe a man's wounded pride. She allows him to feel the full consequence of his actions without interference. And here lies the paradox. The more a man aches under this weight, the more he is drawn back toward the source of it. Pain and desire are not as separate as we like to believe. In the male psyche, the woman who can wound without striking, who can remove herself without bitterness, becomes an enigma worth chasing. She occupies the same mental space as a half-forgotten dream, one he cannot fully recall yet, cannot release. But the greatest danger for him is the greatest liberation for you, The moment you realize his ache is no longer your concern. Because in the space where you once carried his emotions, you now carry your own. The silence that began as a choice becomes your natural rhythm. You are no longer performing detachment. You are living freedom. And so his longing deepens, not because of who you are to him now, but because of the haunting realization that you no longer belong to his world at all. When a woman commits to silence not as a fleeting tactic, but as a way of reclaiming her energies, something profound begins to shift within her. At first, there may be tremors of doubt. The urge to reach out, to explain, to ease his discomfort, can feel almost unbearable. This is because many women are conditioned from girlhood to be emotional caretakers, to smooth over conflict, to keep connections alive even at the expense of their own peace. But every day the silence holds, those reflexes weaken. She begins to notice a strange clarity forming in her mind, a lightness in her body. It is as if she has been carrying a heavy vessel of water for years, always pouring. Pouring in now, at last, she has set it down. This release is not just emotional, it is physiological. The nervous system, no longer primed to respond to his every message or mood shift, starts to find its own natural rhythm. Carl Jung would describe this stage as the withdrawal of projections. For so long, she may have poured her hopes, dreams, and even wounds into this man, seeing in him the possibility of salvation, completion, or redemption. Silence becomes the knife that cuts the cord of these projections, returning her energy to its rightful owner, herself. She begins to see him not as the figure she imagined, but as he truly is flawed, human, unable to carry the weight of her healing. With this clarity comes a new architecture of self-worth. Boundaries no longer feel like walls she must defend, they feel like the natural edges of her being. The way a shoreline defines the shape of the sea, she no longer feels the need to explain them, because they are not negotiable. A man can either approach with respect, or he can drift away with the tide. This internal shift radiates outward. Her voice, when she chooses to use it, carries a different road. Frequency come, assured, untethered from the need to persuade. Her eyes no longer search for approval. They observe, they discern, they see through. She does not seek to be chosen because she is too busy choosing herself. In this state, her feminine energy deepens into something magnetic. It is not the desperate pull of seduction, but the gravitational draw of authenticity. Men sense it before. They understand that something about her presence feels both inviting and untouchable. This paradox is the essence of the awakened feminine, soft without being weak, open without being unguarded. Her silence also becomes a teacher. She learns that words are often wasted where actions speak the truth. She sees how many conflicts dissolve when she does not feed them. She recognizes how the absence of reaction often reveals more about a man's character than any argument could. In time, she realizes the most radical form of empowerment is not in controlling others, but in controlling herself. Self-mastery becomes the foundation of her beauty, her allure, her peace. The man who once expected her to bend, to plead, to explain, he now encounters a woman who moves only by choice, never by compulsion. And if he is wise, he will understand that her silence was not the sound of indifference, but the sound of self-respect. For some men, this realization comes too late. They will circle back, trying to reopen the doors her silence closed, but she no longer needs the closure they offer. Her healing did not depend on their apology. In fact, the absence of it became the forge in which she built her resilience. She no longer defines her worth through the lens of his recognition. His regret, should it come, is a ghost she acknowledges but does not entertain. This is the moment when she steps fully into what Jung called individuation, not merely the healing of wounds, but the integration of her entire self. She is no longer split between the woman she shows the world and the woman she truly is. Silence has made them one. And in this integration, she becomes something rare, a woman who cannot be easily possessed. This is why her energy changes when she walks into a room. It is why eyes follow her, even when she is not dressed to be seen. It is not her beauty alone, it is the way she occupies her own space, without apology. Men may not understand the source of this magnetism, but they feel it and they ache for it, because it is the embodiment of something they cannot take from her. And so the silence that began as a wound, perhaps even as a survival instinct, becomes her crown. It is the unspoken proof that she has walked through the fire of detachment and emerged not empty, but whole. There comes a day when the silence no longer feels like silence at all. It is not a void. It is not an absence. It is the sound of your own soul breathing. You have walked so far from the days when you measured your worth by the temperature of a man's attention that the idea feels almost foreign now, like trying to remember the layout of a house you no longer live in. He may still think of you. He may still feel that gnawing ache, the restless memory of your voice, your presence, your touch. In his mind, you are the chapter that did not end cleanly, the story he wishes he could rewrite, but you no longer live in that book. You have written yourself into a new one. This is the final power of the silent moves. They do not only create longing in him, they create freedom in you. What began as restraint has become rebirth. You no longer have to protect your boundaries like a fortress under siege. They have become the natural landscape of your life. No one crosses them without your invitation, and even then, you decide how far they may walk. Carl Jung often spoke of the self as a union of opposites, a place where shadow and light, instinct and reason, feminine and masculine find harmony. Through your silence, you have done the work of bringing these opposites into balance. You no longer seek wholeness in another person. You have found it in yourself. And this, above all, is what makes the masculine ache, not just the loss of your love, but the loss of being the missing piece in your puzzle. When he sees you now, whether in person, through a screen, or only in the theater of his mind, he does not see the woman who once waited for his call. He sees a woman in full command of her own narrative. It's the kind of woman whose presence is a choice, not a concession. The kind of woman who could welcome him into her life again, does not need to. The ache he feels is not entirely romantic, is existential. It is the quiet terror of realizing that someone can matter so much to you yet live so completely without you. This is why your silence lingers in his bones. It's not because it is cruel, but because it is final. And yet this finality is not bitter. It carries no sharp edges, no need for revenge. It is soft in the way the ocean is soft until you realize its depth could drown you. Your silence holds no malice, because you no longer need him to be anything other than what he is. In letting go of who you hoped he could be, you have released yourself from the cycle of disappointment now. Your days are filled with other things quiet. Mornings, sacred rituals, laughter that belongs entirely to you. You no longer perform your life for the gaze of anyone else. And perhaps the most beautiful irony of all is that this wholeness, this unshakable center, is what makes you more magnetic than you have ever been. Men may approach you now with offerings of attention, gifts, and promises, sensing in you a richness they cannot name. Some will try to possess it, others to worship it, but you will see through them, all not cynically, but with a clarity that allows you to choose without fear. Your silence taught you that you can survive without the validation of being chosen. And in that survival, you learn the greater truth. You are the chooser. For the man who once held your heart, this truth is the sharpest edge of the blade. He may try to return, to test the waters, to see if the door might open again. But he will find that the door leads not to the room he remembers, but to an entirely new house. A house you built for yourself, with walls made of peace and windows open to possibility. Jung would say, you have individuated. You have met the self that was always waiting beneath the noise of your old patterns. You have touched the quiet center, from which all true strength flows. And from this place, you will never again trade your voice for connection, your worth for attention, or your peace for passion. This is the end of his story in your life, but it is the beginning of yours without him. The ache in his soul will remain because the space you once filled is not something he can replace with another woman. It was never about your body, your words, or even your love. It was about the way you made him feel like more than he was. And now, that mirror is gone. You walk forward not with the bitterness of loss, but with the fullness of a woman who has returned to herself, and in that fullness lies the unshakable truth.